We have breaking news at this hour. Donald Trump will now be attending the mass meeting of generals and admirals in Quantico, Virginia next week, called by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. Donald Trump's attendance is causing major security concerns across America's military apparatus as the President of the United States, along with every senior military leader from across the globe, will be in one place, in one room, on the same day, at the same time, and worst of all, the public knows about it. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth previously called this meeting of generals and admirals to meet in one location in Quantico, Virginia. It was a very unusual request per the Washington Post. Why? Because generals don't normally meet in one room with the Secretary of Defense out of nowhere. As we learn more information, Pete Hegseth wanted to give a warrior up speech to the generals at this meeting to try to give them a chance to get fired up about the state of the United States military and also provide updates about the future of the Department of Defense, or as they call it now, the Department of War under Trump and Hegseth. And while a lot of folks were saying that this is essentially a problem. It's a problem to get everyone in the same room at the same time on the same day, and it's a bigger problem that the public knows about it. And while this morning we received confirmation that Donald Trump, the President of the United States, will also be in that room. Over the past 24 hours, according to the Washington Post, Donald Trump decided that his presence is needed at this meeting with generals and admirals. And this is sparking a number of concerns. The first is a security concern. The President of the United States being in this room with military officials, the entire American military apparatus is essentially going to be in the same location on the same day. Now, it is in Quantico, Virginia. It is going to be on a very secure military facility. Folks, it is very hard to get in or out of this facility, especially with the President and the Secretary of Defense being there. And so it's going to be very, very secure. But there are still security concerns nonetheless from those within the Secret Service and within the executive branch and within America's military as a whole. That's number one. Number two, there are concerns that this is going to turn into a possible loyalty test for generals and admirals who are coming to this meeting. If you recall, Donald Trump has had a long history with top military officials. He does not like some of the top military officials in the United States military. Remember General Mark Milley? The two of them, major issues. Mark Milley has called him out as essentially a dictator, a fascist. He was the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Folks don't like him in the military, and Donald Trump has pledged on the campaign trail and since taking office to really purge the military. He's begun to do so. The Department of Defense under Hegseth fired a number of generals early on, reassigned a number of top military leaders at the beginning of his term, and now this new meeting, where the Department of Defense, the Secretary will be present, and now the President of the United States will be present, there are now concerns that this could turn into some type of loyalty test. A loyalty test where if generals and admirals essentially don't swear a allegiance to the President of the United States, then while they could face termination, they could face reassignment, they could essentially lose their benefits as military personnel. And it also comes at a very precarious time for the President of the United States when it comes to military personnel because there's a government shutdown on the horizon. In less than 2 days, the government will shut down. And what that means is military families across the globe will not receive access to payment, access to critical benefits that they have earned for serving our country. Military families will not receive access to those critical benefits and payment for the duration of this government shutdown. And well, if this meeting happens during a government shutdown, then the politics of it are going to be horrific for the White House because you're going to have a president meeting with top generals while the top generals may not even be receiving a paycheck. Let that sink in. So we have all of that happening. And while we're having all of that happening, Donald Trump, his presence at this meeting comes just one day after Donald Trump said that he's going to send the United States military into Portland, Oregon, essentially demanding that the military deploy troops against American civilians on the ground in Portland, Oregon, saying that the military has full authorization to use full force against American citizens. What full force means, though, is unclear. And actually, that term set off alarm bells and confusion within the Department of Defense because the term full force is not used by military officials. That term is not a common one in the military kind of language. And so you have a situation where the United States military may soon have to turn on American citizens in Portland, Oregon, to defend ICE facilities or whatnot, or quell civil unrest, even though there is no evidence that civil unrest actually exists on the ground right now. And just one day after Donald Trump made this big announcement, sending in the military to Portland, he's now announcing, or now we're learning, that he's going to be meeting with top generals, both in the United States of America and from across the globe, in what really seems like a loyalty test, where he will likely speak to these generals and he will likely say a number of things about Washington, D.C., where he's deployed the National Guard to pick up trash and quote unquote beautify the city, to Chicago, where he threatened to deploy the National Guard, but after public outrage, he has since walked that back, to Memphis, where he has announced that he will be deploying the National Guard as well, and there will soon be boots on the ground if there aren't already, and to Los Angeles, where he did deploy the National Guard to quell protests around ICE raids earlier this year, and now to Portland, where in his most inflammatory rhetoric to date, he is going to deploy potentially not just the National Guard, but also active duty United States military personnel to be on the ground, boots on the ground, and potentially have to use law enforcement activities against American civilians if Trump decides to go through and declare that what's happening in Portland is an insurrection and invoke the Insurrection Act to quell rebellion or civil unrest, when in reality, as I've reported over the past 24 hours, it's actually relatively peaceful in Portland, and local officials are saying that we don't want this military presence on the ground. And so you have all of this happening in the United States. Trump is meeting with top generals along with Pete Hegseth. And at the same time, you have serious things happening across the globe, from Eastern Europe, where Russia is threatening NATO, to Israel, Gaza, where there isn't a deal to stop that conflict yet, to China, where China is actively ramping up pressure on Taiwan and showing the public its military force, to North Korea, that is building more nuclear weapons as we speak. And so you have threats abroad, and Donald Trump is focusing his efforts to making sure that the United States military is loyal to one man, the President of the United States. Make sure to subscribe to support my work, and I'll see you soon.